Hi there, friend. Welcome to this story time, a gentle, heartwarming tale for all ages. Whether you're snuggled up in a blanket, sitting on your porch with a cup of tea, or winding down after a long day, this is your space to relax. Today's story is called Moving Away from Home, and I think you'll find it just as comforting as a favorite sweater or a hug from someone who knows you well. Let's begin. Once upon a time, in a quiet corner of a soft green valley, there was a little house by a lake. The house had ivy climbing up its stone walls, a red chimney that puffed cozy smoke every morning, and windows that glowed golden at night. The lake in front of it was clear and still, like a giant mirror, and was often dotted with ducks that swam in neat little rows. This house was home to a young woman named Mira. She had lived there all her life with her grandparents, who raised her after her parents had moved overseas for work. Mira was now in her 20s, gentle in voice and warm in presence, with hair the color of chestnuts and eyes like a quiet forest. The cottage was more than just a place to live. It was where she learned to read beside the fireplace, where she helped her grandfather fix old clocks, and where she made jam with her grandmother every summer from the plum tree in the yard. Every nook and corner held a memory, some cheerful, some soft and bittersweet. Their village, Alderhill, was small and full of charm. Cobblestone streets wove between old cottages with blue shutters. The bakery smelled like cinnamon and fresh bread. The florist always had bunches of lavender outside her door. There were friendly dogs that napped in the sun and neighbors who smiled and waved every morning. But life has a way of nudging us, gently and firmly, toward the next chapter. Mira had recently been offered a job at a children's library, in a town far away, 3 train rides and 1 long walk from home. It was a place she had never seen, full of people she had never met. The offer had filled her with both wonder and worry. She loved the idea of helping children fall in love with books, but she also couldn't imagine a morning without the sound of the lake lapping at the shore, or her grandmother humming as she knit. That evening, as the sun painted the lake orange and gold, Mira sat on the porch with her grandparents. They were sipping chamomile tea, the steam curling gently in the cool air. "I don't want to leave," Mira whispered. Her grandfather, who always wore a soft gray cardigan, gave her a smile filled with knowing. "Leaving doesn't mean forgetting," he said. "You carry this place with you here," he tapped his chest, "and we'll be here," her grandmother added, reaching for Mira's hand. "Always. You're ready, my love, even if it doesn't feel that way yet." That night, Mira lay in bed and stared at the wooden beams above her. She listened to the wind in the trees and the soft croak of frogs by the lake. She tried to imagine waking up in a new place, different streets, different smells, different skies. It was strange and a little scary, but under the fear, there was something else, a flicker of excitement, the kind that whispers, "This is new. This is yours to discover." And just like that, a journey had quietly begun. The morning of Mira's departure was misty and still. The lake looked sleepy, covered in a thin veil of fog, and the sky was painted in pale blues and pinks. Mira stood by the doorway with her suitcase, a worn leather one that had belonged to her grandfather when he was young. Inside were a few changes of clothes, a carefully wrapped jar of plum jam, and her favorite book of fairy tales. Her grandmother hugged her tight, her soft hands lingering on Mira's shoulders. "Write to us," she whispered. "Tell us everything, even the little things." Her grandfather placed a paper bag in her hands. "Cheese scones," he said with a wink. "Still warm." As Mira walked down the cobbled path toward the village train station, her heart was a strange mixture of heavy and light. She waved to the neighbors, Mr. Pastor, Ellis trimming his roses, the postwoman unlocking her bicycle, and they waved back with wide, understanding smiles. The train station was small, with a single platform and a wooden bench. Birds chirped from the rooftops, and Mira sat with the paper bag in her lap, her suitcase beside her. When the train arrived, it puffed out a breath of steam like an old man sighing, and she climbed aboard with one last glance at the valley behind her. The journey was long, but peaceful. Fields rolled by like a green sea. She passed forests full of tall, whispering trees, sleepy villages with sun-dappled roofs, and rivers that shimmered like ribbons of silver. Mira rested her forehead against the window and imagined what her new town would look like. She arrived just as the sun began to lower in the sky. The new town Whisperwill was larger than Alderhill, but still gentle in its own way. Its streets were lined with golden-leaved trees, and the breeze smelled like fresh bread and apples. Mira found her way to her new home, a tiny upstairs apartment tucked above a bookshop. It was small, much smaller than she was used to. The kitchen was barely big enough for 2 feet to stand side by side, and the bed creaked softly when she sat on it. But there was a window with lace curtains that overlooked a garden courtyard, and Mira liked that very much. She unpacked slowly, placing the jar of jam on the little windowsill, hanging her coat on a hook by the door. She placed her fairy tale book on the nightstand and put the paper bag of cheese scones beside it. That night, Mira wrapped herself in a soft quilt, listening to the distant sounds of the town, the creak of old pipes, the laughter of someone downstairs, the rustle of the wind in the trees. It was unfamiliar, yes, but it wasn't unfriendly. The next morning, she visited the children's library where she'd begin work. The building was painted cream with green shutters, and a chalkboard outside said, "Welcome, readers." Inside, the air smelled like books and lemon polish. Shelves stood like gentle giants, filled with colorful spines. Paper butterflies hung from the ceiling, and beanbags lined the corners like sleepy clouds. An elderly librarian named Miss Tilda greeted her with a smile that reached her eyes. "Ah, you must be Mira," she said. "You're just in time for story hour." Later, Mira sat cross-legged on a soft rug, surrounded by little ones with wide eyes and curious questions. As she read aloud, her voice steady and warm, she felt something settle inside her, a small click, like a puzzle piece finding its place. She was still far from home, but already, something here was beginning to feel like hers. Welcome back, friend. It's time for the third part of Mira's story, a chapter full of gentle joys, soft discoveries, and the quiet magic of new beginnings. So, settle in, take a breath, and let's step back into Whisperwill together. Mira's days began to take on a gentle rhythm. Each morning, sunlight poured through the lace curtains of her little window, painting golden patterns on the floor. She would make herself a cup of tea in her tiny kitchen, open the window wide, and listen to the town waking up, the birds chattering in the trees, the bakery bell jingling down the lane, and the hum of bicycles passing by. At the children's library, she spent her days surrounded by stories and laughter. The children grew fond of her quickly. They'd tug on her sleeves, asking her to read just one more book, and they brought her little drawings of dragons, flowers, and smiling suns. Mira decorated her desk with them like a colorful garden. Miss Tilda became a comforting presence, offering advice on everything from organizing shelves to baking lemon muffins. "The trick," she said one afternoon, "is not to make life perfect, but to make it sweet." One Saturday morning, Mira wandered into the courtyard behind the bookshop. It was quiet and overgrown, with ivy trailing along the brick walls and a wooden bench tucked beneath a flowering tree. In the center was a little neglected garden bed, dry and forgotten. Mira knelt down and brushed her fingers through the soil. It wasn't too late to bring it back to life. The next day, she bought a few seed packets from the local shop, lavender, daisies, and thyme. She planted them carefully, humming softly, just like her grandmother used to do. Each morning before work, she'd water them, whispering a cheerful good morning. The flowers didn't bloom right away, but that was all right. Some things needed time. She also started writing letters to her grandparents, long, detailed ones filled with descriptions of the children's questions, Miss Tilda's sayings, the smell of rain on cobblestone, and her little apartment with its creaky floor and view of the garden. Her grandparents always wrote back with stories from home. The plum tree was blooming, the ducks were nesting by the lake, and they had saved her favorite chair by the fireplace. Mira hung their letters on the wall with tiny clothespins, a paper garland of love. One evening, as she sipped tea in the courtyard, a soft meow interrupted her thoughts. A small orange-striped cat appeared from behind the bench and plopped down beside her, as if it had always belonged there. Mira chuckled and reached out her hand. The cat rubbed against her fingers, purring contentedly. "I'll call you Whisker," she whispered. From then on, Whisker became her quiet companion, often found curled up on her windowsill or trotting beside her in the garden. The little apartment no longer felt so quiet. It felt alive. The garden began to bloom small at first, just tiny green shoots, but they were full of promise. And as the flowers grew, so did Mira's sense of home. She had thought home was a place, a single, unchanging place by a lake. But here, in the quiet moments of her new life, in the laughter of children, the warmth of letters, the scent of thyme, and the soft weight of a sleepy cat on her lap, found something she hadn't expected. Home, it seemed, could grow again, like a garden. All it needed was care, time, and a little sunlight. Several months had passed since Mira first arrived in Whisperville. The seasons had begun to turn. The trees traded their green for gold and rust, and the air carried the soft scent of wood smoke and apples. Mira now walked through her days with a quiet confidence, like someone who had slowly stitched new roots into the ground beneath her feet. The little garden behind the bookshop had fully come to life. Lavender swayed in the breeze, bees buzzed lazily in the sunshine, and the thyme spread gently between the stepping stones. Children from the library sometimes peeked through the gate to visit Whisker, who basked like a prince among the blooms. One crisp afternoon, as Mira shelved a stack of picture books, Miss Tilda approached with a familiar envelope in her hand. "Another letter from home," she said with a smile, placing it gently on the desk. Mira wiped her hands on her apron and opened it carefully. Her grandmother's neat handwriting flowed across the page. "Dearest Mira, the plum tree is heavy with fruit again. Your grandfather says it's waiting for your hands to pick them. The ducks still gather by the lake in their usual spot. It's quieter without you, but we know you're where you need to be. We are so proud. Come home for a visit soon. The fireplace misses you. Love, always, Grandma." Mira sat for a while, holding the letter in her hands. Her heart ached in a sweet way, not from sadness, but from deep, tender love. She missed her old home. Of course she did. But this new life she had made was no longer just the place she lived. It had become part of her story, just like the lake house, the plum jam, and the bedtime fairy tales. Later that evening, Mira stood at her window and watched the town glow with warm lamplight. A pot of stew simmered on her little stove. The scarf her grandmother had knitted lay folded on the couch. Whisker was curled into a tight ball on the windowsill, softly snoring. Mira reached for her notebook and began a new letter. She told her grandparents about the garden, the new story hour she'd started on Thursdays, and the little girl named Elsie, who had drawn her a picture of a castle in the clouds. She ended the letter with something simple and true. "I think you were right, Grandpa. I did carry home with me, and it's growing, every single day." That weekend, she boarded a train, this time heading back toward Alderhill for a visit. The journey felt different now. The fear had faded, replaced with a sense of gentle belonging in two places at once. When she arrived, the valley was glowing in autumn light. Her grandparents stood waiting at the platform, bundled in soft scarves and holding a thermos of spiced tea. The hug they shared was long and warm and full of everything words couldn't say. That night, Mira sat between them by the fire, her favorite blanket over her knees, and told them every story she'd been saving. And somewhere between laughter and quiet, crackling logs and the scent of cinnamon, Mira understood something she would carry forever. Home isn't a single place. It's made of people and moments and the small things we carry in our hearts. Thank you, friend, for joining me on this gentle journey. If you enjoyed this story, I invite you to like, subscribe, and return again soon for more cozy tales to warm your day and rest your mind. Until next time, stay safe, stay kind, and always carry a little piece of home with you.